Have you noticed that you are completely done with certain parts of your life that you once tolerated? Like something inside you is finally saying, I've had enough. I've had enough of the grind. I've had enough of this person. I've had enough of this career. I've had enough of this food. And you might find that something inside of you is suddenly beginning to reject sometimes many things at once in your life that were completely fine at one point. And this happens when you're in the process of shifting into a higher timeline. It's an internal evolution that's going to demand external change on your part. And it can be kind of confusing and sometimes frustrating, and sometimes you don't really know what's going to come next or how to deal with some of these things that still might be present in your life. You might not have yet a solution for them. But this video is all about this. It's going to tell you the 6 most common things that people who are going through this type of consciousness shift and upgrade suddenly start rejecting in their life, and also share with you some ways that you can navigate this transition. I'll start with the most common one I've been hearing a lot lately. It's that people who are going through this shift are completely fed up with what I'll just call the grind. The busyness. Why are we so busy? Why do I have so much stuff on my plate? Why do I work so hard to maintain a life I can barely enjoy? Everybody's doing it. It seems to be what's normal. I'm not sure exactly how to go about not doing it. And you might start to feel trapped. You might start to feel trapped in your life and the duties and obligations and to-do lists that seem like they just keep growing and growing and growing while your bandwidth keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And you wonder, like, where's the breaking point? What does one do? Now, here's the good news. You will find a way out of this. This is your way of recognizing that even though this might be normal, this is not authentic to you. Your busyness does not align with your newly discovered, perhaps, value system of what really matters to you. What does it mean to live a good life? A life when you are moments before closing your eyes for the last time that you can look back on and say, you know what? I gave it my all. I did my best. No regrets. You might start thinking like this. Whether you're thinking exactly like that or not, you're looking probably more so at the big picture. And what does it mean to live a good life? And then you look around at what you're doing with your time and you think, God, this is not it. This is so far from it. I don't even know where to freaking begin. And this is where the fatigue comes in. This is when the overwhelm sets in. This is where many people start to kind of spin negatively downward because they feel trapped. And in a sense, you are. But the silver lining is, you're trapped. Some of you. You know there is a solidity to your life circumstance that you can't immediately lift yourself away from. The good news is most people don't know they're stuck. Most people don't know they're living in a prison in a sense. And so therefore there's no real earnestness, there's no desire to break out. You at least want to break out. You see the prison cell you're living in. And even though you don't immediately have a solution, you're at least aware of it and then can start thinking in a very different way. When you start thinking about your life in this way, you will always start to attract to yourself the ideas, the people, the opportunities that you may have previously been blind to. Suddenly you're aware of, you're awake to them. And slowly but surely, you'll find a way out of the prison, I promise you. I've been in it. I've been in multiple ones myself. I've broken out and then unconsciously created new ones that I had to break out of again. It's just this process of waking up more and more and more. But then the demand upon us for us to continue growing is to keep our life circumstance on track with how we're evolving internally. But I wanted to just bring all of this to your awareness if you do feel stuck. if you do feel kind of hopeless, if you have realized that, you know what I've been doing is not it, and it's kind of a scary thought to not know what is it, but that's the beginning of discovering what is it. That's the beginning, just honestly owning this is not working for me. Okay, fine. The moment you can really let that settle in, even though it's uncomfortable, is the moment you start to begin to attract ideas and sort of through your inner guidance, navigate your way out of it. This next one, I'm not going to go too deeply into. I've been talking at length about it, but I wrote down food-like substances. This kind of comes from when I was a personal fitness trainer and doing a lot of studying about nutrition and the human body and fitness and things like that. I forgot who it was, but there was this person who had like a real strong opinion against processed foods that most people eat. And he would call it, he wouldn't even allow it to be called food. In his mind, it was a food-like substance. The type of food that pretty much comprises the entire middle of a grocery store, if you notice that. On the perimeter, there's, produce, and then there's like your meats and your dairies and your cheeses and things like that. But in between, in the middle of all of that is, for the most part, the food-like substance. And hey, I love going out to eat. I love enjoyable foods, but quite frankly, there came a point where my body started to reject it. You will start to manifest symptoms in your body, whether it's fatigue or fogginess, you're not sleeping well, or inflammation, achiness, just your skin not looking good, all these different things. Your body will start being very honest with you and transparent about whether it's preferring what you've been feeding it or not, even though what you may have been feeding it, you've been doing for a long time. It doesn't matter. You're changing. The spiritual awakening is not just a mental shift. It's literally a biological process that demands, just like your life circumstance, us, the participants, play a part and make the adjustments. And the cool thing is, wherever you're feeling these symptoms, it's like it's a helpful clue to what you would benefit, like really benefit and be better off letting it go. Because even though it can be kind of a, depending on what it is for you, if you really enjoy a certain type of food or something, you're like, man, I think I am better off with this. Just trust your body, and then know that like being able to embody a higher state of consciousness far outweighs whatever sort of temporary short-term pleasure you get from that food. But regardless, your body is going to start demanding you clean it up, and you can be happy because so many people, like I know a lot of people, I used to be a trainer again, and people would eat, even people who thought they were eating healthy, like in my professional opinion, were not at all. They'd bring in this like this sugary granola and this very high sugar, very processed yogurt, and they'd say, "Look at my breakfast," and it's like, no, too much sugar, too little protein, like whatever. I'm not here to judge, but the point is, most people's bodies aren't doing this. And yet it's still going to probably catch up with them later in life. You are getting like more immediate feedback to what's resonating with you, whether you like it or not, whether it's convenient or not. You know where you stand with the food you eat. And the more you start to kind of follow suit with what your body's communicating to you, the more energy you're going to have, the more mental clarity you're going to have, the better you're going to feel overall. And the higher state, the states of consciousness you'll be able to kind of tap into and embody on a day-to-day basis. In fact, the solutions to some of the problems I was discussing before oftentimes will come in these elevated states of consciousness that is very directly impacted by the foods you eat. The third thing is one-sided relationships. They'll start to cause very obvious problems. I would call it like negative synchronicities. When there's an energetic imbalance between two people who are spending lots of time together, if it's either unconscious or just ignored, what I have found, and you can let me know in the comments, please, below, if this has happened to you, but I found that it will start to like manifest in these sort of situations that kind of force you to deal with it, where you're kind of pushed beyond your limits. This happened a long time ago when I first started growing cannabis. And it was with my real close friend. We got along very well, my buddy Derek. And I got into this kind of partnership where we agreed to split everything 50-50. But, as time went on, I was doing pretty much all of the work. He would promise to come over and just not show up. I would send him home with things to do and he wouldn't do them. And it was just a lot of excuses. And anyways, for a while, I just accepted this. I kind of put up with it because I didn't feel confident in my growing abilities to do it on my own. But nonetheless, the discrepancy just continued to sort of bring me more and more like very obvious problems where I had no choice but to kind of stand my ground and stand up for myself. Whereas before, I can look back and see how this imbalance was there all along in other areas, but I was not as aware of it. And also, even the things I did kind of notice, I didn't have the confidence in myself to like speak up and speak my truth. But what I'm saying is that your awakening is going to kind of sometimes make things a bit more dramatic to kind of like push you to finally like own your worth and speak your truth and act accordingly. Whereas before it may have been a lot easier to be in denial and just kind of like brush things under the rug. Your awakening is not going to let you be a people pleaser, is what I'm trying to say. It's going to physically wear you out to allow in a severe imbalance in one of your relationships, regardless of the story, regardless of how many years you have under your belt, regardless of, what they did for you at one point or whatever it is, regardless if it's family. It's an energetic thing. This is also why everything else is falling out of your life, or at least attempting to, whether it's the career or the life situation or the food. It's like you are changing. Not just the way you see the world, but the way you vibrate through life. It's raising, it's upgrading. And the faster you grow, which you really can't stop it, good luck. You can't contain it. Once it starts, there is no turning back, as they say in the flashy thumbnails you see sometimes. True. And you can't stop it. You can't stop your growth. And it's going to continue to cause more and more problems until you have the courage to let go of some of these things, including the one-sided relationships. And you know what? What I found a lot of times, what stops people and what has stopped me in the past is guilt. And not just guilt like this sort of just like negative emotion that we tend to judge, but also just like my conscience. Some of the relationships I've been in, I knew they don't really know any better. They don't really know quite what they're doing. They're not that aware of like the stress they're causing me. I also know if I try to communicate that, they still might not get it. And I know they mean well. So anyway, this is kind of what would sometimes create it. And I would think I'm doing them a favor though, and being like, turning the other cheek, so to speak. But oftentimes, what does that really do? What I found for me anyway, is it enables it. Sometimes it's beneficial because if someone's doing this to you, you're probably not the only one. So by you being like the first one to speak up and say, hey, this is not working. This is not fair. We gotta talk about this. It might initially be this uncomfortable like conversation for both of you. But in the end, you might help improve not just your relationship. It might be what needs to save the relationship. It also can have this ripple effect on this other person's relationships. Or not. You have no control over that. But nonetheless, for you to not keep suffering, it will require you address if there is some type of relationship imbalance going on right now for you. Another one I just wrote down, dense energy environments. This could be where you work. This could be where you live. This could be just places you used to go that were no problem. For me, just over the years, as an example, I found that like where I live, I'm much happier if it's quiet, if there's space, there's less people. Even if they're cool people. I've lived in some pretty cool cities with lots of cool people, like a cool collective vibe, I would say. But over the years, I've find myself like desiring more and more space, more and more nature, less and less people, less and less artificial, like structured, even like houses and buildings and things like that. Now, here's the thing, the caveat with that is sometimes it's just not practical to just up and move, and I get that. And I've been in, living in a community, living in a city where it wasn't ideal for me, and I felt all the dissonance I'm describing. I knew in my heart this is not ideal, that I'm not going to thrive here, yada yada. But sometimes it's like we live in the real world, that we can't all just up and move or up and change our, quit our job and things like that. But what I found is that just accepting it, okay, you know what? Where I live is not my preference. I'm not thriving here. So what freedom do I have? And what comes to mind is this one time when I was like, for a while, kind of griping about it. Like, man, we live in a low vibe area. I just wish I lived, in this other city where I could be in nature. And I became very like cynical and judgmental and kind of like just very discouraged because I felt stuck. And then I realized what was more of a problem than my environment was my negative attitude about it. And I said, you know what? How can I make the best of this? Because the reality is I can't just leave right now. I am stuck here for a time. Okay, it's where it's the lot God has given me. What can I do to make the best of it? And I realized I was not making the best of it. So I decided to one day, and I just walked outside of my house. I was like having this whole conversation in my head, just like thinking about it. And I said, you know what? I'm just gonna like bust out of my house and go for a random walk. And I chose to kind of go down streets and take turns I normally wouldn't turn, just to kind of try to mix things up and see what was around. And you know what happened? Not even 5 minutes away from my house was this beautiful entrance, or this beautiful cemetery that I could get to right from my subdivision. Now I know some of you are thinking, "Oh, that's kind of weird, Vic. Cemetery, bro." Um, I don't care what you think, because it was amazing. It was super quiet. There was no negative spirits around. There was plenty of nature. It was like this oasis of nature right there, smack dab in the middle of this busy city that for 3 years I resented my presence in. And I would go there. We'd bring the family there. I used to go and work there. I spent a lot of time in this cemetery. In fact, a lot of my earlier YouTube videos were filmed in that cemetery, right in front of this beautiful pond that was right there all along, when I just sort of shifted my attitude. And even though I couldn't move, which is what my mind told me must happen, our higher self can be very creative. There's a lot of times creative solutions to these dilemmas, whether it's the food, but whatever it is. And like, the first step though is recognizing this is not working for me. And then eventually you can oftentimes find these creative solutions, like I did with the neighborhood. You might find yourself becoming more and more resistant to what I just call the mainstream noise. Mainstream media, doom scrolling, all these kind of things that, again, so many people do. You may have done a lot of it yourself, all of a sudden aren't working for you, aren't working for your body. You're starting to notice how it's affecting your level of consciousness. It's affecting your just ability to be present and in the moment. It can even influence the way you see the world. And you might see this. You might, for example, be in like a really good state of being at one point, and then you go and you kind of start diving in, and you realize just how impactful that can be. It's funny. And I'm not saying to do this. This isn't maybe necessarily the smartest thing to do, but even when really big things happen in the world, I almost never know about them. I never watch the news. I try, if I do go on social media, like, it's always just for like mixed martial arts and things like that I'm really into. And I really have no grasp for what's going on in the real world. And I know this is like maybe not smart in some ways, but um, I found that, I'm aware enough that the world is a mess, and that if I can keep myself in like a positive state, I'm just one guy. But if I can do that, I can do my thing. Like, this is how I contribute to the world. I can do that to the fullest when I don't allow myself to kind of get into the weeds with all the the negativity. It'll wear on me. It'll make me kind of cynical. It'll make it hard for me to receive these creative ideas to share with you guys. And regardless, you might just in your own way be finding like your own balance with it. Maybe you don't have to go to the extreme as I do, which is sometimes comical. People be like, oh, do you hear about like the tsunami or the earthquake or this or the war? And I'm like, oh, no. And I live in my own little bubble, but that's what works for me. You might find that you just have a boundary with your phone. You like just it could be anything. Some kind of creative little solution you might find can go a long way with helping you maintain a more positive, beneficial frequency in your day-to-day life. Finally, the most important thing I want to share with you is you'll find that it becomes increasingly intolerable to suppress your truth. It'll be very uncomfortable if you don't allow yourself to be yourself. You could eat healthy food. You could live in the freaking Himalayan mountains. You could throw away your phone. You can do all this stuff. But if there's like a part of you longing for expression, acknowledgement, wanting to have a voice, and you suppress it for whatever reason, I know it's hard sometimes. Sometimes there's part of you that emerges. It's like there's no real place for it. Imagine me when I was running. Before being on YouTube, most of you know this, I used to run a personal training gym and I grew marijuana. And, I had, I don't know, 20, 30 people in like my life that I would see and I was around. And all of a sudden, this sense of purpose, these creative energies started to kind of come to me, and these downloads, these inspirations, this feeling of a calling and fate, even at times. And it was to do what I'm doing now. But as I looked around at my life, I thought there is I tried to initially reconcile them with my current life circumstance. And like, how could I express some of this here or there? And there was no answer to it. It required me to just sort of embrace it fully. And for me, it was to go online in spite of what people were going to think of me, which I knew was going to be a mixed bag of reactions. The majority, I suspected, would think there's something wrong with me. They would be worried about me, think I'm crazy. I thought I might be like discredited as a fitness trainer, all these kind of concerns. So, some of them were right, to be honest, and for a while, I tried to hold it in because of all this. My mind had all these objections, just as your mind might have objections if you allow yourself to speak your truth right now in your life. But what I found, and you might find as well, is that you can only keep the lid on for so long. The pressure just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And I found myself feeling so disconnected, so off, so unhappy, just so miserable. And I knew it's because I'm not being myself. In fact, I used to hear this song by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. It would come on, and the lyrics were something along the lines of, I'll be here, or no, what was it? I'll be there, just tell me when you want to go. Something like that. And like the way I took that, it was like my higher self was saying, I'm here. I'm already in this other reality, living an authentic life. I'm here. Just tell me when you want to go because you're not here yet. That's like how I took it. It was like this, it may have sounded confusing, but to me, it was a very clear, like communication that I'm not living an authentic life. I'm keeping a lid on a part of myself that demands expression. And you know what happened eventually? That pressure became too great and my life kind of spit me out and I found myself here in front of you. And thank God I did that because I feel much better. I feel a lot more free. I'm a lot happier. My life has taken so many beautiful twists and turns, and I've experienced so many wonderful upgrades. And there's this sense of being in alignment that is priceless. It allows your life to flow and experience more synchronicity and opportunity and abundance and happiness and joy and all that stuff. But it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to be yourself in a world that is the way it is. So have patience with yourself, my friend. But the main reason I brought you here to this particular video is for this final thing I just said, because I have a feeling a lot of people right now relate with where I was, where you know it's time to really speak your truth, write your book, start your podcast, come out of the closet, whatever it is. But I'll tell you what, holding in the truth, in my experience, is way more painful than letting it out, even if people react. You can set yourself free. You can get into alignment. You can tap into like your highest timeline, but it will demand the courage to be yourself. And I pray that you all can do that, because I bet the part of you who wants to come online and start making some choices and expressing itself in your life is pretty cool. I bet I would dig them, and I bet the world could use them right about now. So thank you so much for watching, my friends. God bless. May you have the courage to be yourself as best you can. I'll see you soon. Peace.